A heavy hush fell over the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan. Conversations died out, silverware stopped halfway to plates, and every eye turned to the narrow aisle between the tables. There, 10-year-old Oliver Turner fought to hold himself up in the metal braces wrapped around the legs the accident had damaged 2 years earlier. With every tremor, the steel gave a soft creak, but the boy didn't back away. He stretched out a hand to Emma Barnes, the restaurant's only black server, just as the pianist eased into a whispered ballad. The gesture was sliced in half by the razor-sharp voice of the manager, Jackson. "Sir, control your child. This is not a dance floor. Our staff are not here for your entertainment." William Turner, an investment magnate used to bending markets, not audiences, felt his back glue itself to the chair. It was the first time he'd taken his son to a public dinner since the long rehab, and he'd sworn nothing would go wrong. The order came out low, almost a fearful murmur. "Oliver, back to your seat." Tension crackled through the room like live wire. Emma, her hand suspended between yes and no, realized any move could change the course of the night. The pianist, maybe unaware, kept the tune going, each note blowing expectation across the still faces in the dining hall. Oliver, eyes locked on the young woman, still didn't understand why a simple invitation seemed to weigh so much in the air. In 5 years on the job, Emma had learned to move like a shadow around the tables. That night, the whole room held its breath when she slipped off her apron and laid it on a tray. In a steady voice, she said, "Mr. Jackson, my shift is over." Then she reached for the boy, still waiting. Oliver, strapped into metal that groaned with every step, had kept his arm raised since the invitation. Turner's gaze, he was a billionaire used to absolute control, flickered with surprise. "What exactly are you doing?" he asked. "Just saying yes," Emma answered. The silence that followed made the room feel smaller. Customers watched the pair's slow progress with their hearts in their throats. Oliver scraped one foot forward. Metal squealed on marble. Emma matched his pace without pushing or pulling, sinking into his rhythm. A few guests pulled out phones, but no button was pressed. The moment felt too fragile to fit on a screen. People whispered the waitress would be fired in the morning. Turner stayed frozen, though something in his expression softened. A memory cut through him, his late wife spinning with their son in the old living room, repeating, "Connection, not perfection." In the center of the dining hall, Oliver lifted his chin. Fear gave way to focus, and shame sparked a flare of pride. For the first time since the accident, he was leading. Eyes met around the room, recognizing that this simple moment shattered every bit of protocol. "Mr. Turner," the manager said in a tight voice, "I promise this won't happen again. She'll be disciplined." William didn't flinch. Servers stopped, diners craned their necks. One gesture from him could ruin careers. No words came. Inside his head, Oliver's smile drowned everything else out. Moments later, Emma guided the boy back. "Thanks for the invite," she said, far too formal for her age. As she turned to leave, William raised a hand. "Wait, what's your full name?" "Emma Barnes, sir." He repeated it slowly, like committing a code to memory, pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. "My office. Tomorrow, 10 sharp." The room froze again. Silverware stopped clinking, and the wall clock hammered out the seconds. Emma took the card without changing her expression. Only her fingers trembled. Oliver broke the silence. "Dad, why did you do that?" The question hung there, sharp-edged. William looked at his son and for a beat saw past the uniform, a human being whose wishes had been ignored for 2 years. Dinner continued in thick silence. Few noticed Emma's final glance, calm, determined, while in William Turner's eyes a storm began to gather. At sunrise the next day, the atrium of Turner Tower gleamed with glass and marble, mirroring the morning. Emma walked in with measured steps, wearing the navy skirt and white blouse she'd hunted down at a neighborhood sale. Watching flawless suits and silent heels glide past, she guessed some of those fabrics cost more than a month's rent. "Emma Barnes, appointment with Mr. Turner," she told the receptionist. The woman held a protocol smile, looked her up and down, and called upstairs. 18th floor, Miss Morgan will meet you." In the mirrored elevator, Emma clutched her worn purse to her chest and took a deep breath. It wasn't fear. She sensed something bigger, as if her whole journey had led to these few seconds of ascent. When the doors opened, Miss Morgan appeared, a 40-something with a clinical stare and a ramrod spine. "Mr. Turner is in a conference. Follow me." They moved along glass-lined corridors that multiplied every step. Staff paused discreetly, whispers, raised eyebrows. A black woman in the executive wing hadn't been on that morning's script, and the suspense in their looks was tangible. Still, Emma kept her chin high. Her stride carried the strength of someone who'd already walked through far harder trials. As soon as the waiting room door closed, Morgan couldn't hold back. "He kicked you out, didn't he?" "One phone call from a big-shot client and we, the underlings who don't know our place, get stuck with the bill." Emma curled the corner of her mouth without a hint of a smile. "And what place would that be, in your opinion?" The extension rang, cutting off the answer. The receptionist announced, "Mr. Turner will see you now." The hallway led Emma to an office that took up half the floor. Glass panels stretched from floor to ceiling. Outside, Manhattan looked like an expensive toy. From the center of the room, William Turner watched the skyline as if taking inventory of his assets. "Mr. Turner," she greeted in a neutral tone. "Miss Barnes, thank you for coming," he said, pointing to the lone chair in front of the desk. "Please have a seat." Several long seconds of silence followed. It was the classic tactic: stretch the tension until the visitor says more than they should. Emma held her posture. William broke the ice. "What's your background?" "Sorry?" "Your studies, college, any specializations?" She didn't look away. "Bachelor's in Child Development from NYU, working toward a master's in special education, not finished yet." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, too quick to become a full expression. Silence returned, now in a different key, as if new pieces had just been placed on the board. "And besides the waitressing shift? Actually, I juggle 3 gigs. I wait tables during the week, restock shelves at a bookstore on weekends, and tutor whenever a student pops up." William lifted a leather folder. "I looked you up, Miss Barnes. I wanted to know who the woman was who—" He hesitated. "Danced with my son." He spread photos of a colorful warehouse across the desk. Above the door it read, "Steps to Happiness." "You founded the project 6 years ago." "I co-founded it with my sister Aria, a dance workshop for kids with motor limitations." William flipped through pages, each loaded with numbers. "The place is about to shut down for lack of funds." Emma exhaled, unsurprised. "I didn't come here to ask for money, Mr. Turner." "Then why are you here?" "Because you invited me." He gave a brief, almost skeptical smile. "Fair enough, I need your services." Emma frowned. "You want me to wait tables at your house?" "No, I want you to stay with Oliver." At the mention of his son's name, William's gaze darted to the frame on the desk, a radiant woman hugging a baby. The silence that followed seemed to swallow the office. For a moment only, the tick-tock of the clock filled the space. Emma clutched the paper she carried, realizing the offer was more than a new job. It could save Steps to Happiness and be the starting point for something she couldn't yet name. "I bring the best specialists in the country to my clinic," Turner said, adjusting his jacket. "Even so, what you did yesterday was just a dance, Mr. Turner." He swallowed hard, a hint of fragility slipping out in a brief sigh. "It was the first time I'd seen Oliver smile since the accident. I'll pay you 5 times your salary." Emma stood up. "No." The word hung in the air like something out of place. Turner blinked, unused to obedience he couldn't buy. "You're turning me down out of pride?" "Out of dignity," she replied firmly. "And because your son needs something money can't buy, a real connection." Color rose to his cheeks, but she went on. "I don't work for people who see my skin or my address before judging my skills, or for anyone who treats feelings like line items in a budget." Reaching the door, she let each sentence out as if opening windows. "Oliver doesn't need another specialist. He needs room to choose his own path." "You don't know him," Turner tried. "No, but I know people whose limitations are smaller than the invisible prisons built by those around them." She pulled out a card. "Steps to Happiness. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. bring Oliver. The first class is free." On her way out, she ran into Morgan in the hallway. He pretended to be surprised, but his flushed face tipped off that he'd heard everything. The door closed behind her, leaving the offer, and a silence full of possibilities, hanging in the air. Emma had barely hung up the phone when Aria burst into reception, panting. You turned down William Turner's offer? I did, Emma replied firmly. I'd rather be free than become a trophy. The next Wednesday, the community center was quiet until the growl of a Bentley sliced through the afternoon. Arya pressed her face to the glass. There's a multi-million-dollar car out front. Just wait till you see who's inside. Emma walked over. In the back seat, Oliver was drumming his fingers on his hearing aids. His father, behind the wheel, gripped the leather as if he were trying to tame something bigger than traffic. He won't come in, Arya whispered, adjusting her hijab. People at that level don't set foot in here. Emma remembered the lightning-quick waltz she'd danced with Oliver at the charity gala. Stubborn boys move mountains, she said, never taking her eyes off the car. The door handle lifted. Oliver stepped out carefully, took a deep breath, and, as if rehearsing his courage, took one step forward. The next instant froze everyone's attention. William got out too. He had traded his Italian suit for chinos and a sweater, a timid attempt to look ordinary, though his posture betrayed every digit of his fortune. I told you he'd come, Emma murmured, feeling her heart race faster than that engine. Arya frowned. What did you do? Emma watched father and son cross the street toward a world William had always thought he could buy, but was now having to learn to visit. Lying under the bed of a tiny Bronx apartment, a threadbare covered notebook held years of notes on boys like Oliver and fathers like William Turner. Every page detailed progress, fears, PT schedules, and a strategy that had begun the moment Emma Barnes agreed to dance with the boy. With that step, she had gained direct access to the mogul's empire of glass towers and limitless accounts. William had never suspected that the shy, smiling waitress had a clear purpose: to prove that independence can't be bought with checks, and that Bill was about to come due. Steps to Happiness ran in a former community warehouse. Hand-painted posters read, "Your rhythm, your rules, and every move matters." On the wooden floor, kids with walkers, prosthetics, and wheelchairs tried out steps to a gentle beat. Emma greeted father and son with a steady nod. Oliver was mesmerized by a girl spinning her chair in perfect circles, while a boy with a carbon blade pulled off airborne combos. It looks chaotic, William muttered, adjusting his jacket. There's a method. It's just not yours, Emma shot back, reaching out a hand to Oliver. Ready? The boy nodded but looked to his dad for confirmation. William took a deep breath. Go, I'm right here. As soon as Oliver joined the group, Arya pulled up a chair next to him. The first day is tougher on the spectators, she said. This isn't therapy. I pay for the best specialists, William retorted. Arya leaned in, voice calm. And has that been helping Oliver? The creak of the hinges announced someone's arrival. A woman with measured steps came through the door, leaning on an ornate cane. Gray braids fell over her coat and her raised chin silenced the room. Dr. Amelia Davis, Arya whispered, reminding everyone, former Harvard professor, a leading authority on brain plasticity. Davis greeted the kids before facing William. Mr. Turner, you shelved my projects 3 times in the last 2 years. William cleared his throat, surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. I run this initiative. We study how non-directive movement reorganizes neural circuits in children with motor limitations. He frowned. I thought it was just a community dance class. Emma stepped back into the center, leaving Oliver to improvise with a partner. Steps to Happiness is a rehab pilot. We combine adaptive dance and neuroscience, she explained. William raised an eyebrow. So why do you work as a waitress? Lack of funding. And because decision-makers like you said no to the proposal. It sank in. You were the doctor's assistant, he concluded. Co-author, Davis corrected. Emma put her master's on hold to care for her sister, but she built the foundation of this program. Emma smiled. I knew who you were from your very first order at the restaurant, she admitted. When Oliver stood up to dance, I saw a chance to show, not just tell. Was it staged? William asked, feeling his stomach drop. Not at all, Emma shot back. Oliver chose to stand up, I just went with him. The studio doors swung open and a wave of reporters poured in, cameras flashing. William froze. What's this? Phase 2, Emma said, nodding toward Arya. On her tablet, the headline bounced, Motor Rehab Method Achieves Unprecedented Results. Dr. Davis published the data today and invited the press, Arya explained. You turned my son into a showcase, William whispered, his voice sharp. Emma led him into a side room. The walls were lined with photos of children, each tagged with notes on daily progress. At the back, an empty frame drew the eye. "And that?" he asked. "A whole future that still fits right there," she said. "With funding, we'll help 500 kids a year, not just 50. William ran a hand over his face, trying to gather his thoughts. "You set up the dance, arranged this visit, timed it with the paper." "I couldn't miss the chance," Emma admitted. 4 months ago, when you canceled our meeting without reading the proposal, I promised I'd find another way." Before he could answer, Arya appeared in the doorway, pale. "It's Oliver." The hallway seemed to shrink as the three of them bolted the same way, their footsteps echoing. Oliver positions himself in the center of the room, surrounded by classmates, just as the music stops. The silence that follows isn't awkward, but expectant. He unstraps one brace, lets it drop like a float on a lake, and rests only one hand on the side rail. William takes half a step, ready to steady his son, but Emma touches his arm and whispers, "Wait, let him have the moment." Oliver fills his lungs, straightens his torso, and shifts his weight onto the newly free leg. The room holds its breath. Then comes the step, short, shaky, yet completely new. A wave of kids' applause ripples through the space, cameras flash, and even the teachers forget protocol to celebrate the move that wasn't in the script. At the edge of the group, William, who always sent clinical reports instead of photos of his son, feels tears rise. They don't fall, they shine. Emma leans in and, almost voiceless, says, "Steps to happiness exists for this. We don't look for perfect steps, we look for steps that come from them." Only then does William see Oliver from a new angle, not as a problem to manage, but as a boy discovering his own inner mechanics. "You didn't need to push me to come," he murmurs. "Maybe," Emma replies, "if you'd read our messages." The reporters realize who he is and the buzz grows, but Oliver keeps going, testing a second step with his eyes fixed on the floor, as if every inch were the map of a world that just opened. William Turner, used to moving pieces like swapping numbers on a spreadsheet, found himself cornered by circumstance. 2 paths stretched before him: step back and reinforce his unshakable tycoon image, or embrace the moment his son had opened in front of the cameras. Between the control he'd wielded for decades and the freedom Oliver claimed with a single step lay ground where money couldn't buy the next move. Flashes popped. Reporters waited for a statement. William's gaze shifted between Oliver's slow smile, exploring the new movement, and the wall of microphones. Humility had never visited his vocabulary, but something gave when he caught the spark of discovery in the boy's eyes. The melody of power, tuned in boardrooms and gala dinners, now sounded off-key. Could he put down the baton? Emma Barnes, who'd stitched it all together, watched every second with quiet focus. "Mr. Turner," a journalist ventured, "can you confirm that your foundation refused to fund Steps to Happiness 3 times? The question sliced the air. William felt the weight of every past no. He turned to Oliver, drew a deep breath, and before anyone filled the silence, an unexpected smile slipped out. "You know what the toughest challenge is for someone in my position?" he said, projecting to the whole hall. "Admitting when you're wrong." The space froze, caught between an old reputation and the promise of a different future. Silence settled as the Turner Foundation logo filled the big screen. The spokesperson announced, "The institution will fund Steps to Happiness for the next 5 years and build a rehab center based on Dr. Davis and Miss Barnes's method." Flashes exploded. Arya let out a gasp. Then William Turner raised his voice and set one condition. Emma Barnes would keep full autonomy over the program, with no corporate interference. The audience held its breath before bursting into applause. 3 months later, excavators were cutting through the land where the Steps to Happiness Center would take shape. There would be no marble or chandeliers, just rooms designed from kids' drawings and family notes. Emma walked the site almost every day, notebook in hand, jotting down ideas that drifted up with the smell of fresh concrete. And she was never alone. Oliver showed up often, sometimes leading other curious little ones. To the crew's surprise, William Turner himself would appear too, hands in his pockets, silently watching every bit of progress. One afternoon, looking over the blueprints, Emma said, "I didn't think you'd come to the board meetings." William laughed, rubbing his eyes over an article covered in colorful sticky notes. I didn't think I'd be studying neuroplasticity at 50 either, he answered, sliding the paper toward her. Yet here we are. The workers kept going, raising the first beam like someone opening a new chapter. Emma kept her eyes on William, puzzled by his unannounced visit to the center. Is this chat part of your penance, or do you really care? Oliver asked to ditch his second brace last week, he said. He told me. The previous physical therapist swore that wouldn't be possible for another 2 years. Emma raised an eyebrow. You fired her, remember? You were the one who said she was wrong. And she was, William admitted. She held up a picture of Oliver balancing with just one crutch. His progress has steamrolled every medical manual. William bit his lip. Why didn't you ever accept my apology? Because there never was one, Emma shot back. You poured in money, changed policies, beefed up the team. That's compensation, not remorse. He nodded. Fair. 6 months later, the difference was striking. The adapted lobby buzzed with kids in wheelchairs, walkers, and prosthetics, all pushing their limits with methodical joy. In the middle, Oliver, now wearing only a light brace on his left leg, led a routine alongside 3 classmates. The steps were still short, but they sprouted with a confidence no prognosis had dared to predict. William watched from a distance, hands in his pockets, giving up the space he'd once tried to occupy. He doesn't need you to hold him. He doesn't need my hand anymore, Emma whispered at the edge of the floor. Maybe not, William said, still focused on the boy. But he needs to know I'm still here. That changes everything. The rhythm of Oliver's crutches marked the hush of the gym. With every tap, the crowd breathed in sync, tuning their own hearts to the boy's beat. William turned to Emma, shoulders loose. Thank you. For what? For reminding me that leading is also knowing how to follow. A reporter slipped past the rope line. Mr. Turner, how do you feel seeing your son like this? William pointed to Oliver, who was helping a little girl and showing her how to shift her weight on the parallel bars. Proud, not of the hurdle he cleared, but of the space he made so others can cross too. And the biggest lesson from this journey? William, famous for billion-dollar mergers, looked into the camera. Real leaders don't line people up behind them. They walk when someone shows them a better path. The quote echoed, but practice went on. Emma was already getting messages from physical therapists in other cities interested in the Steps to Happiness method. Sweating, Oliver swapped his crutches for a light cane and headed back onto the floor, now side by side with newcomers. Amid flashes and questions, William grasped something simple yet huge. Sometimes the decisive step is letting someone else move forward, just to see how far everyone can go after that. In a world where people in suits hardly ever question their own dogmas and nobody slip by unnoticed, an unlikely meeting takes shape between William, Emma, and Oliver. William, owner of empires and a packed schedule, thought he listened to the world, but really only heard the echo of his own voice. Emma, balancing trays while counting every penny, knew the city from the inside, its tough corners, its untold stories. Oliver, who admired his dad from afar, tried to chart a path of his own, away from the spotlights. Everything changes on a rainy pre-dawn morning. William steps into the cafe looking for silence. Instead, he gets Emma's disarming question. Who was he without the numbers? Tension turns into curiosity. He comes back the next day and the next, leaving a bit of ego at the door with every visit. Intrigued, Oliver decides to watch. Tagging along with his dad, he discovers real strength doesn't live in spreadsheets, but in eye-to-eye contact that sees the other person. Thanks for walking with us this far. If this journey touched you, remember, every step, no matter how small, can open huge paths for you and for the people walking beside you. So take a deep breath, pick your next step, and allow yourself to inspire and be inspired. Like, share, and subscribe so more people can discover the transforming power of a simple act of dignity. See you in the next video, and until then, may your steps be filled with courage, empathy, and purpose.